YouTube, we are back today with a follow-up video to our previous blue hybrid discussion. The link to that video will be down below, so feel free to check it out, but I wanted to get another video out there just going over some of the updates that I've made to my blue hybrid build so far after doing some preliminary testing since BT-14 has come out. I wouldn't call it a tier 1 deck by any means, but I do think this deck has the capability to be very decent and very competitive in today's format, and probably into the next one as well. It's a deck that is quite dear and close to my heart, so I've definitely had fun blowing the dust off this deck, and I've had just a lot of fun testing it again and just whipping it out. So feel free to drop your feedback, comments, any suggestions you may have below. I do think this deck is very flexible in how you can run it and how you can pilot it, so I'm sure there's a ton of builds out there, so I'm excited to see what you guys are running as well if you are playing blue hybrid again. And like as always, for those of you always tuning in, thank you, and thank you for all the support. We really do appreciate it. It means the world to us. So hopefully you enjoy this video. Let's hop right into it. Alrighty guys, so starting off with our eggs, very similar to what most blue decks will be running nowadays. It's going to be Bukamon from BT-14 to give your stack jamming. I think with how much source stripping you're doing with this deck, I think jamming's absolutely just huge. So I think you definitely just run 4 Bukamon. I don't envision any other egg that you would be running in this deck. Moving on to our rookies, we are running 4 of the BT-4 Strabimon. Mainly just the searcher, right? You drop it for 3, you can search your top 3, pick up a hybrid and tamer and traits. So really good for early game, just cycle and search. Next rookie we're running is 4 of the Gomamon from BT-14. Really good card, I think, particularly for the blue hybrid source strip archetype. Start a main phase to be able to strip a card and not be blocked, I think is huge. Because with how sometimes you're able to manipulate your source stripping as well as your memory, Goma being able to take away a source, not be blocked, and then go into potentially another level 4 that can proc off jamming and survive, I think is really good for what this deck wants to do. And then on top of that, being able to recur itself out if that stack were to be deleted, I think is just good aggro too, right? You're able to swing potentially with a level 4. If that 4 dies next turn, you just spit the Goma right back out and it's there ready to go if your opponent can't deal with it. So I think really good aggression and source stripping potential with Gomamon. And that actually does round out our level 3s. We're only going to be running 8 of them. I thought about running Bokomon to help with my sort of memory efficiency plays as well as my cycle, but I did find deck space to be a little bit tight with how I want to set this deck up, so I'm not running Bokomon. I'm just sticking with the 8 rookies over here. We are running 1 Lanamon, mainly as just an additional hybrid target. And it's also a good way to just cheat into a level 4 for just a 2 cost on top of like your Gomamon, for example, right? Because sometimes you do want to keep those hybrids in hand. So I think Lanamon as an additional hybrid target versus just an additional Digivolution target, I think is really good. I probably won't be proccing its Twin Digivolving effect, just because, as you can see, level 3s are just a little bit of a tight commodity. But I think having 1 of Lanamon is helpful. Next, we run 2 Ikakumon from BT-14. I really like this guy. I think his effect is really good. Being able to Digivolve, strip 2 sources, pairs really well with Gomamon. And then when attacking once per turn, you can declare one of your opponent's Digimon with fewer sources. They can attack next turn. So, like a pseudo stun mechanic in a sense, right? And the inheritable is the same. When attacking, you can choose one of your opponent's Digimon with less Digivolution sources, and they can't attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. So I think really good for a little bit of control and a little bit of that sort of blue hybrid stun mechanic there. So I really do like him. Like I said, pairs very well with Gomamon. More likely than not, we'll be able to swing with jamming, which pairs very nicely with our ace card that we'll be talking about in a little bit too. So I definitely like 2 of Ikakumon. We are running our typical hybrid package with 4 Kumamon and 4 Korikakumon. not much to say besides pretty self-explanatory. This is sort of the heart and soul and core piece of your blue hybrid deck, so I think you have to maximize that hybrid package. In terms of level 5s, we are running 4 of the Beowulfmon, which again is pretty standard for most blue hybrid decks, if not all blue hybrid decks. The ability to Digivolve for 1 if you have a Tamer in sources is huge, and also the ability to recycle your hybrids I think is also absolutely huge value. Very, very good. You know, being able to swing, bounce a hybrid. You know, yes, you get some board control as well by bouncing a equivalent level, which will probably be a level 4, right? But at the same time, just being able to use your hybrid again, I think is just great value. But moving into the more, I think, spicier level 5 is our Zudomon Ace card. Zudomon Ace, I think, is probably the best ace that we got out of this set, outside of Magna Angemon. But Zudomon Ace basically lets you strip 2 sources and then bounce a card without any Digivolution sources back to your opponent's hand. So I think really, really good value both on Digivolve, like just a regular Digivolve, as well as a Blast or Ace Evo, right? Because, for example, say you've done your damage with Ikakumon, it had jamming, so it swung, it lived, it's sitting there. You could easily just Zudomon Ace next turn, strip 2 sources, and bounce something again, which I think is just really, really good. It is an 8K, so it's a pretty big body that most people will have to factor into when they're doing their plays. And I think just gives a lot of control value and additional source strip value. So I think just the perfect card for what Blue Hybrid wants to do now. And then rounding out our Digimon actually is just going to be 2 of the Azulongmon from BT6. So Azulongmon is a card that I haven't used in a long time, but I think has huge potential now in today's meta, particularly with how often you're going to be seeing these like wide board decks, right? For example, like Commandramon, Fenrir-Lugamon, they're playing cards out from trash all the time, and most of the time they're not with any Digivolution sources. They're either there to swing or they're there to just act as a body. So if you're able to do a Azulongmon, most of the times you Digivolve into him for 5, but if your opponent has a wide enough board, I mean, heck, you're going into this guy for 1, 2, sometimes even for free. And then the ability to gain +1 security check for every card without a Digivolution source is huge, right? Because, I mean, Blue Hybrid typically was more of that, like, poke deck. And I think back in, like, BT8, BT9, where you started to see a lot of the more, like, single stack decks, it was a lot harder for Blue Hybrid to do a whole lot in terms of overall aggression because this guy was taken out of the picture. Now that we're seeing boards that are more wide again, I think this really gives Blue Hybrid that extra sort of like push over the line to close out games a lot more faster and be a lot more aggressive. I would think definitely about running like BT11 Mirage Galgamon because I think that's also a really good card for this deck and this archetype. But I think in today's meta, Azulong just edges him out. I will test a little bit more with Mirage, but I think ultimately I will settle on Azulong for my 2 level 6s. Now moving on to our Tamers. The unrestricted, now free to roam wild Tamihimi. 3-drop allows you to strip the bottom 3 Digivolution cards of your opponent's deck. Just really, really good, right? You know, and pair this with Korikakumon and being able to swing and stun. I think it's just really, really, really good. I'm happy to see him back out. I know most folks aren't, but I've missed using him and being able to wreak havoc with Tommy. We're running 2 Davis again, just for search and memory setting. You know, this deck is really good at manipulating memory and being really efficient with its plays. But having a memory setter also is really, really helpful, particularly in the early game, because it just helps you set up your Tamers a little bit more efficiently. We're running 3 of the new Joe Keto. I like Joe. I think it definitely replaces the starter deck, the original starter deck, Matt Ashita, as like the 2-drop. I think Joe is a really good card because it essentially is a 2-drop because on play you get to strip a card. Every time you strip, You can suspend him to gain a memory, so he essentially becomes a 2-cost tamer. And with Blue Hybrid, you kind of want to be able to spit out these cheap, sort of memory efficient tamer cards quickly, because that's what will allow you to like hybrid digivolve and, you know, do your pokes and go for your combo plays. So I think Joe as a 3-of is really good. I don't think you run, like, again, I don't think you run the starter deck Matt Ashita anymore. I do wrap up the Tamers with 3 Sora Joe, again, to maximize my ability to source strip. And again, with how many decks that are just spinning out Digimon without any Digivolution sources, they kind of have to pay that tax if you have Sora Joe, so I think that becomes a lot more relevant. If they don't want to catapult you up to like 9 memory to start turn, they need to be able to play around that or be wary of that. I think alternative tamers you can consider are like BT-9, Matt, and Sora. Again, to kind of help with like late game option gain. I think you could also consider, like, if you want to run the Magna Garurumon package, running Koji. I'm not, obviously, with the Zulongmon, so I'm not running Koji, but I think you can consider running Koji as well. But this wraps up my tamer set. In terms of options, we're running one of the Ice Wall. Again, pretty self-explanatory. This deck wants to be sort of as a low to the ground and as annoying as possible, and I think Ice Wall is just sort of helpful for that. We run 2 Howling Memory Boost. Again, with how much source strip that you're able to do, I think Howling can become very relevant. And also with how many decks are just spin bodies out, you know, Howling can definitely just stun a lot of things now. Being able to gain 2 memory is always a nice bonus. So, running 2 of Howling, we run 3 Marching Fishes, which I think is essentially like a Power Crept Innocence Blizzard from BT-8. Being able to pick 3 of your opponent's Digimon that have less sources than one of your own and just stun them for the rest of the turn, like the rest of your opponent's turn, I think is just great. The fact that it activates itself and then adds it to hand when checked in security, I think is also just really, really good, because you're able to proc effect and then potentially just do it again next turn, which allows you to kind of stall out and kind of wait for the right time to pull your plays off. And then we're running 3 Sorai. Again, really, really busted card with how many decks, particularly nowadays, that are running like spitting stuff out and have these like solitary Digimon on board. I think Sorai is just huge for that. This is why I'm not running, you know, any trainings or any Bokos, just because like my option cards are all focused on source strip and stun, and I wanted to maximize that. You know, you can almost think about this deck as like a blue Setcon in a way, which seems a little toxic, but at the same time, I mean, I think it's really good at what it wants to do. And I think I've tried to optimize my source strip and stun mechanic as best I can. And that's the deck profile, guys. Like I said, the video description to like the overall discussion of like what Blue Hybrid wants to do, how to set things up, and how to set up your Blue Hybrid plays will be in the video description down below. The deck photo itself will also be in the video description if you guys want to take a look at it later on. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think of my build. Let me know what you guys are running as well if you are playing Blue Hybrid. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.